Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and tonight we're going to break down every game from Week 13 NFL Sunday. People, I hope you enjoyed it. We did not have any Thursday Night Football. It was a tough stretch. I know we had the Wednesday afternoon game, but had been a while since we've seen some live action, and boy, we had some good games out there. So there were some duds as well as always, but plenty to get through either way. Want to go through every single matchup, touch quickly, on the skill position players, obviously the quarterbacks, just what happened, run, pass, and get some of the snaps there. Mainly, I want to try to touch on things that, don't show up in the box score, drop passes, miss big plays, things that can help us, more actionable information moving forward, and try to avoid some of the pitfalls that come with, your typical box score scouring sometimes. So I have gone through and been able to watch every game so far. Obviously, got to watch multiple at the same time. So, feel free to make fun of me as much as you like if I do mess something up. But seriously, if there is something that you notice I'm incorrect about or you have a different opinion about, please feel free to hit me up on Twitter at iHeartitz or hit up the PFF Fantasy Twitter account at PFF_Fantasy. But without further ado, let's get after it, everybody. First game, Browns defeat the Tennessee Titans 41-35. What a performance from Baker freaking Mayfield. So, look, we told you last week on this podcast that despite that, brutal miss he had to Rashard Higgins, Mayfield played one of his best games of the year against the Jaguars last week, kept it going in this one in a major way. Obviously, Titans, better team to beat up on the Jaguars, but to Baker's credit, this was now just his second game really in the last 5 games that he wasn't playing, and just awful weather in Cleveland with rain and wind all over the place. So, again, 334 yards, 4 touchdowns, pretty much all that production did come in the first half, and he should have had 5 scores in the first half if Donovan Peoples-Jones didn't drop in the easy slant for a score. But, just one dime after another at Higgins and Landry. There were a lot of open guys and very little pressure throughout. I get it. This was not necessarily a game where we've seen Baker do a bunch of stuff that he hasn't, shown he can do before. I think more of the issues people have with Baker is how he can respond, with pressure and kind of working on to his secondary reads and things of that nature. So it was really easy for the Browns offense, but hey, it's 41 points. The Browns are freaking 9-3. We can worry about these, itty bitty problems later. The good thing was Baker Mayfield. This was a great game, and we just haven't seen that many great games from him this year. So whatever you want to say the conditions were, how good the Titans were, how bad they were, just realize, the more of these great games we can have for Baker, the better chance the Browns are going to have of actually making some noise in January. So they can run the ball on anybody. They weren't quite as successful in this one, only team-wide 3.3 yards per carry, but Nick Chubb still had 80 yards in the score on the ground. Kareem Hunt didn't have too much going, only 2.4 yards per carry, but just realize, this was a game that, hey, I understand Baker didn't exactly have the toughest throws he had to make time after time. I felt like he had more tight window throws in Week 12 than Week 13, but either way, did everything you could ask for, a more great game from Baker Mayfield. With Ryan Tannehill, 389 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception through the air. Look, they were down 17-0 in the freaking blink of an eye, so he had to really keep his foot on the gas. Derrick Henry still got his 15 carries, but that was about it. We did see them passing throughout most of this game, so a number of deep, great throws to Corey Davis and A.J. Brown. Reminds me almost a little bit of the Falcons offense sometimes when they get going, because it's just, one deep in, deep out after another to, Corey Davis and A.J. Brown, just 2 big physical freaks that guys also have to respect them running deep. So it becomes a situation where Tannehill is able to step into his throws, get some velocity on those suckers and get it to his big, badass wide receivers. So, it wasn't a perfect performance. You did see him take 3 sacks. Weren't able to get any sort of rushing floor. There were a number of times where you did kind of wonder what Tannehill was thinking in terms of pocket presence and getting the ball out of his hands more quickly than we would have liked. But, could have had an even bigger performance. Again, I mentioned almost 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. A.J. Brown survived an ankle scare, thank God. But he should have had about a 20-yard touchdown. But as he was dragging a defender into the end zone, he actually fumbled it, and then Mecole Pruitt picked it up and brought it in the rest of the way. So had that mistake, and he also dropped a good 40-yarder down the seam later that could have added to Tannehill's numbers as well. So AJB still had a good game, 4 catches, 87 yards, but could have been much bigger from him for sure. I'm just happy he's healthy. Corey Davis stole the show with 11 catches for 182 yards and a touchdown and 12 targets. People, the only guys with more yards per route run than Corey Davis this year, Devontae Adams and Justin Jefferson. He is having a fantastic year. Legit every week upside wide receiver 3, if not a wide receiver 2 at this point. Seriously, he dudded against the Bears a couple weeks ago, goose egg. But other than that, really throughout the year, Corey Davis has been balling. Mentioned on the Browns, Higgins and Landry had those touchdowns. Donovan Peoples-Jones also had a 75-yard bomb for a score on a filthy double move. Mentioned how he dropped that one score. It was good to see him make up for it afterwards with that. Quickly with these backfields, Nick Chubb played 50% of the offensive snaps, Kareem Hunt 49%, so pretty split. We did see Hunt, come in more in mop-up time, but it did end up being Chubb, with 19 combined carries and targets, and Hunt was, right there at 17. So, look, Chubb is the locked-in RB1, but Hunt, I still think more times than not is going to be able to give us lower-end RB2 value. Like, he wasn't making the most out of his opportunities in this game, and it's been this way a little bit in some of these recent weeks, but just realize, like, Hunt is getting the workload that we want in this backfield. The Browns run the ball enough to enable two fantasy relevant backs, just haven't quite gotten all the efficiency that we wanted from him recently. On the Titans side of the ball, Derrick Henry, 55% snap rates. Why do we have Jeremy freaking McNichols playing 45% of the snaps when you're paying the big dog that much money to be your back? I've always thought, the idea that Henry is this game script dependent back was a little bit overblown because, again, he had 15 carries and a target in this one. But yes, we want games where the Titans can play with the lead. That's when we're going to see Henry potentially double those rush attempts. So this was a rough one, but don't worry, everybody. Devember, is that what we call it? Dehember, whatever the hell the freaking phrase is for Derrick Henry in December. We'll get going with that. I'll work on it. It's 11:30 right now Eastern time, so give me a break, everybody. I'm out here grinding. We'll work on the Derrick Henry nicknames later. Injuries in this one, mentioned the A.J. Brown ankle, but he returned. But just realize, A.J. Brown this year, he's already been dealing with a knee injury all year. He popped up on the injury report with a hip injury. I know this was not one of his better games. He's had some issues with drops, just kind of momentary lapse of focus throughout the season. But is a situation where he has been playing through the pain throughout the year. We'll do a PFF Lily matchup stat for every one of these. For those that don't know, Lily is my 25.5-pound wiener dog. She just turned 1 on Saturday. Happy birthday, PFF Lily. But anyway, matchup stats in honor of that glorious wiener dog. Here we go. Baker in this game, 25 of 29 for 334 yards and 4 touchdowns when not under pressure, when he's kept clean. When under pressure, he was 0 for 4. So look, this season, including this week, Baker is 6th among qualified quarterbacks, at least 100 dropbacks, and PFF passing grade, not under pressure. 20 touchdowns versus 3 interceptions, 8.4 yards per attempt is 9th. That's fantastic. Legit top 10 quarterback when not under pressure. A lot of that was aided by this game, but you know what? This game counts towards the season just like the rest they do. Under pressure is where we've had the problem. Baker's 38th out of 43 qualified quarterbacks in PFF passing grade, 39th in yards per attempt. So, Baker, when he has time and you can give him an open receiver, man, he can put it on him with the best of them. Just hasn't quite been a situation where when things break down, we see the same caliber quarterback. But great win for Baker and the Cleveland Browns. 9-3. Go crazy, Cleveland. Next game, we got the Dolphins beating the Bengals 19-7. I actually saw some, people cutting on Tua a little bit after this performance, but, he had 296 yards and a touchdown. It could have easily been approaching 350 plus, if not more, because he hit Jakeem Grant between the eyes pretty much on a 50-yard bomb down the middle of the field that Jakeem just couldn't hold on to. So I actually thought this was Tua's best game of the year, and we've been pretty critical of him on this podcast, just in terms of more of his fantasy player. He's playing winning turnover-free football, and he does deserve credit for that. When we go out and we see, these younger quarterbacks like your Drew Locks and even your slightly older ones like Carson Wentz just, unable to hold on to the ball or limit sacks, when Tua is able to do it in an easy matchup, I get it. We're not freaking out too much, but the fact Tua has generally done a good job of protecting the ball is a good sign for things to come, because clearly, he is trying to just play a little more ball control than I think he's used to, and hopefully he can open things up while continuing to not give away too many plays. With the Bengals, Brandon Allen was awful. He threw a 72-yard touchdown on Tyler Boyd. Okay, guys, it was a 1-yard pass that Tyler Boyd then took to the house on a screen thanks to the Dolphins blowing their cover 0, which they run more than just about anybody. So cover 0, great rewards, but you do carry a pretty big risk if you do not tackle well at the line of scrimmage. So if you remove that, and look, I understand I don't like removing big plays, but in this case, I think it's relevant because, again, this was hardly a pass that asked Brandon Allen to do anything. You remove that play, you only had 81 passing yards and 18 attempts with 1 interception and 5 sacks. Ryan Finley came in afterwards, had a tipped interception. Look, we've been saying on this podcast really since Joe Burrow went out, you cannot trust anybody in this Bengals offense, including Giovanni Bernard, as long as Allen and or Finley are under center. So credit to Boyd for taking that screen in the house, but that's hardly something we can hang our hat on moving forward. We did have some ejections in this one. Guys are getting chippy. They actually, I think it was Mike Thomas on the Bengals. He laid out Jakeem Grant twice pretty early on punts, and even Brian Flores was coming out trying to bark a little bit and say something to him, but When you look at the overall guys, Boyd, Devontae Parker, Mac Hollins, and Xavier Howard, I believe, all got ejected for, throwing fists or just kind of getting after it. Well, some of them were pretty weak. I think the Boyd and Xavier Howard ones probably shouldn't have, but at least Devontae Parker was out there throwing fists, trying to back up his teammates. T. Higgins, 5 catches, 56 yards. Myles Gaskin had 51 yards. Mike Gesicki had a good game, 9 catches, 88 yards, and a score. It was good to see him finally come through without, having Ryan Fitzpatrick back there, because that's just been the issue with this Dolphins offense. So one game we still didn't see, a huge reliance on Tua, but 39 pass attempts, we hadn't seen him, even past 30 attempts in his previous starts. So I'm still not ready to say Tua is going to be this awesome fantasy quarterback. We still didn't see a rushing floor at all. He only had 3 carries, no rushing touchdowns. And, we do have more evidence than not of him, more or less being a ball control player. But at a minimum, I think Gesicki and Devontae Parker, we can treat as, just upside wide receiver 3 and lower end tight end 1 as long as Tua is under center. Truly, I wanted nothing to do with anyone other than Myles Gaskin with Fitzpatrick. So the fact Tua played as well as he did in this one is good for these guys moving forward. Would note with these backfields, Gaskin came right back from the IR and played 70% snaps, 21 carries, and 2 targets. Expect him to be a legit upside RB2 into the fantasy playoffs. He is their 3-down back, pass, early, goal line. He gets it all. Unfortunately, couldn't find the end zone in this one, but, ended up with 141 total yards and looked good doing it. He had a fumble at the end that could have helped them find the end zone, but wasn't meant to be. I don't think that's going to result in any sort of discipline or anything. Gaskin's been pretty good about that all year long. With the Bengals, Giovanni Bernard, 66% snaps, 12 carries, 2 targets. Samaje Perine showing there at 34%. By the way, just real quick, these snap percentages all are unofficial right now. Some of the people are still grinding through the games, but I took them at about 11:15 p.m., so we should be good for the most part. But yeah, look, Giovanni Bernard, it's a situation where he's not getting the same targets he was with Burrow under center, and he's also losing work to Samaje Perine. We could see Joe Mixon back next week. Gio's someone you're going to keep on the squad, until we do see Mixon back for sure. But either way, he's certainly not someone that needs to be in starting lineups as long as this Bengals offense largely remains broken. So our PFF Elite matchup stat, 40 QBs have at least 100 dropbacks this season. The only ones with a turnover-worthy play rate under 2%, Aaron Rodgers, Alex Smith, Deshaun Watson, and Tua. Credit to the rookie for taking care of the ball. And I know I've called him Tua this whole segment. I will make it my mission to figure out his last name after, in my opinion, his best performance of the season. It's a tricky one. I don't want to do him a disservice by not, pronouncing that correctly. I got to work on that, everybody. Next matchup, we got the Raiders defeating the Jets, 31-28. Absolutely wild game. And we'll start with the ending. Derek Carr hits Henry Ruggs for a 46-yard walk-off touchdown when the Jets confusingly decided to pretty much do like a zero blitz, everyone pressed up, man coverage, and more or less allow Carr to chuck it deep. Now, we've had some guys, Dan Orlovsky from ESPN came out and said this is what Greg Williams has always been doing, referencing some, plays he had done previously. I, remembered the Cardinals against the Packers back in 2014 or 15, I believe it was, the Jeff Janis throw where, Aaron Rodgers actually got blitzed and he chucked it up and was able to complete it anyway. So it wasn't the first time we've seen teams in a Hail Mary situation not exactly, leave just everyone, 8 or 9 guys back in the end zone. This was probably the first time, though, that was a combination of not only sending 7 guys, but also not keeping your defensive backs, like not even giving like a cushion to try to, stay back and be in a better position to not let someone run directly behind you, like Henry Ruggs. To me, I think the people think that people were missing a little too much out of this. Like the worst part about this was the play before that touchdown. Nelson Aguilar got behind everybody, and Derek Carr just overthrew him. So literally, like they made the same mistake twice in a row, and they got burned for it. Now you might say, was it a mistake or were they absolutely trying to tank for Trevor Lawrence? It's a good question. I mean, it was obviously something that came down from Greg Williams. It was such a horrendous call. Like, okay, if you're saying it's not a tank, then how can you like just say anything other than, yeah, our coach completely screwed that decision up? So it's a tricky situation. Obviously, none of these players are tanking. I mean, Sam Darnold, you really think Sam Darnold will be playing bad throughout this one? They're trying to get his team in a position to replace him? Of course not. And you think that cornerback who Henry Ruggs beat for that touchdown, you think he wanted to put that on tape? Of course not. But it was a position where the coaching was either so bad that they put their team in this laughable position where the entire world thinks they're tanking, or their coaching was so bad that they either were tanking or they're just that bad. So which one is it, Jets? You pick. Once again, your franchise is pretty much an embarrassment to the entire league. But hey, hopefully you get Trevor Lawrence and hopefully you can actually surround him, unlike you have really done with Sam Darnold. That was the issue, in this one. I mean, Jamison Crowder, 5 catches, 47 yards, pair of touchdowns, but I really thought after last week, first game Sam Darnold had Perryman, Mims, and Crowder. He set his career high mark in average target depth for a single game. That just wasn't the case in this one. Darnold, the first 3 drives, he threw touchdowns, but after that, we just kind of saw him come back to earth. 3 picks, lost a pair of fumbles, also had an interception. So just not, a good game. He had a great rushing touchdown where he trucked the living crap out of somebody as he got into the end zone. So that's Darnold's second, marquee rushing highlight this year. He had that wild, 50-yard touchdown run on Thursday Night Football way back when. But yeah, Sam Darnold, just another game where every once in a while you see the flashes of arm talent, but ultimately he's not going to be someone we're getting behind in fantasy with Adam Gase. And honestly, for everyone in this receiving game, now that Crowder is back to kind of being the number one guy, it did seem like they were transitioning to these outside receivers more, but now they're pretty much all impossible to trust. I'll probably rank Crowder as a number one guy again next week, but none of them are going to be among my top 36 options at wide receiver. With this Jets backfield, Ty Johnson ended up leading the way because Frank Gore got concussed and ended up missing pretty much the entire game. He had 1 carry for 2 yards, got the concussion, and ended up having to leave after that. So unfortunate news there, but it was Ty Johnson, 62% snaps, 22 carries, 2 targets. Josh Adams, 32% snaps and 8 carries. I would just, caution people before you blow your remaining fab on Ty Johnson. This is the Jets. We know how freaking low this floor and really ceiling is for everybody involved in this offense. And this was a situation where they only had, these 3 active running backs. So, they're not going to go into next week with only Ty Johnson and Josh Adams. Expect someone, if Gore does remain sidelined, to join them and make this an annoying 3 RB committee. On the Raiders side of the bar, mentioned Derek Carr, with that game-winning touchdown, really played well in this one. 381 yards. 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. It wasn't perfect, but again, he played well overall and ultimately got them the win. Well, regardless of whether it should have been this hard or not against the Jets, story for another day. It was a nice bounce back spot for Derek in general. He did miss though. Again, that one long ball to Aguilar at the end of the game. He had another one, even potentially 3 touchdowns to Nelson Aguilar. That Carr just really didn't even give him a chance to catch. But Carr also was in a situation where he added a rushing score, as did Darnold, and just the connection of Darren Waller. My goodness, 13 catches on 17 targets, 200 yards, and 2 scores for Darren Waller. So it was just Carr to Waller, all freaking afternoon long. Jets couldn't do a thing. The first touchdown was a pretty route where he just hit him in the back of the end zone. And the second one was a little bit more yak goodness from Waller. So Waller is freaking 6'6", 255, and he runs a sub 4.5 40. Absolutely wild that guy can function as a true inline tight end and not just be some gimmicky wide receiver. I'm not saying he's a fantastic blocker, but this is not just someone that lines up outside. He does it all, and he does it at a very high level. Number 2 tight end in fantasy this year, behind only Travis Kelce. Even if George Kittle would have stayed healthy, we're talking about anyone's idea of a top 3 talent at the position. He had himself a career high game all the way around. With this Raiders backfield without Josh Jacobs in the picture, Devontae Booker 43% snaps, Jalen Richard 39%, Theo Riddick 18%. Makes you think it was a 3-back committee, but we saw Devontae Booker get 16 carries and 2 targets. Jalen Richard only had 4 carries, Riddick only had 3, and each of them only have 1 target. So it sounds like Jacobs going to have a chance to be back for Week 14, but if not, Devontae Booker with this type of workload, again, it's not Jacobs. We were not touting Devontae Booker as an RB1 like we would Jacobs, but this is a legit RB2 workload, and I know this was frustrating and didn't work out the way we wanted to in a perfectly winnable matchup. But just remember, Boston Scott busted the first time, was good the second time. We got frustrated with Duke Johnson. Then he had a good game on, Thanksgiving. We are following the usage, people. We can't just let a 1-game sample size of, the efficiency we don't want sway our future decision making. Devontae Booker is still going to be a top 24 running back in Week 14 if Josh Jacobs remains sidelined. PFF Lily matchup stats. So 11 guys this year are averaging at least 2.2 yards per route run. Said that wrong. 11 guys over the past 2 seasons are averaging at least 2.2 yards per route run. This is regardless of position. George Kittle, Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, Stephon Diggs, Austin Eckler, Tyreek Hill, Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, and Darren freaking Waller. Truly, he's a tight end. Call him whatever the hell you want. Darren Waller is a legit number 1 wide receiver, and he has been great at that for the better part of the past 2 seasons. Next game, we got the Colts defeating the Texans 26-20. Absolutely great game from Deshaun Watson despite the losing effort. Had the Texans in a position to win at the end. Had pretty much a bad snap inside the 5-yard line. Unfortunately, the Colts end up recovering it. So Watson couldn't get the win, but just realized even without Will Fuller out there, just one awesome off-script play after another. Didn't throw for a touchdown, but he did run for one. David Johnson also punched one in on the ground as well. So DeForest Buckner and this defensive line, they sacked Watson 5 times. They were in the backfield seemingly all game. He made the most out of pretty much everything, particularly when you consider, one of the reasons why with Watson we were pretty confident still firing him up as a top 5 fantasy QB this week, even without Will Fuller, was because he still had Brandon Cooks. Cooks missed part of this game in the concussion protocol. He cleared it and came back, which is great because that Lord knows that guy's had too many concussions already. But Kiki Cootie, 8 catches, 141 yards. Chad Hansen, 5 catches, 101 yards. Let me tell you what, people, it wasn't like these guys were making just spectacular contested catches and bailing out Watson. It was mostly him doing it. I'm not hating on Hansen or Cootie, but truly, Deshaun Watson is, in my opinion, playing at potentially the second highest level of any quarterback in the league right now, behind only Patrick Mahomes. So, hey, if you really were starting a team tomorrow and you had to think about who you wanted your QB to be for the next 10 years, I get it. Mahomes is absolutely number one. We can talk about Russ and Aaron Rodgers and what they have left in the tank too, but I think if you purely stripped all of our biases and all of our we've seen this guy do it for 10 years, and Watson's only done it for 3 or 4 years away. I truly think if you just look at what Deshaun Watson brings to the table, his ability to impact the defense as a dual threat QB with an arm that can force him to guard pretty much every square inch of the field, Deshaun Watson deserves to be in any argument about the top 3 quarterbacks in the league, both real life and fantasy. Looking at the Indianapolis team, Phillip Rivers 27 for 35, 285 yards with a pair of scores, playing through an injury that's described as worse than turf toe, so he's going to need off-season surgery to repair his foot. So credit to Rivers for continuing to be just a warrior. People forget he played through a torn ACL in a playoff game once upon a time. With those yards, most of them went to T.Y. Hilton, 8 catches, 110 yards, and a score. Also found Jonathan Taylor for a 39-yard touchdown. People, I'm happy Jonathan Taylor can catch passes. This was something coming out of Wisconsin that, he had drop problems and we just didn't even know if he could be a receiving back. And the fact that he has shown, soft enough hands and not had drop problems is great to see. Don't reference today and be like, wow, look how great of a receiver Jonathan Taylor is. Nobody guarded him 39 yards. I'm happy he's fast enough to run untouched into the end zone. But as we talked about this Colts offense, let's chill out on giving guys too much praise for running, untouched for too long at times. That's why we've luckily been able to avoid the Michael Pittman trap over the past few weeks, because we saw when he was producing, it was usually of the fluky variety, people just not guarding him and him being able to run untouched down the field. So again, I'm happy Taylor, they're not afraid to throw him the ball, but don't get that, confused. Don't be the person that looks at, Leonard Fournette, when he caught 70 passes last year and say he was a good receiver because of that. Sometimes the numbers do lie, ladies and gentlemen. With this Colts backfield, though, it was a Jonathan Taylor show to an extent. 49% snaps, 13 carries, 3 targets. Still had Nyheim Hines out there, though. 33% snaps, and Jordan Wilkins, 18%. They combined for 11 carries and 5 targets themselves. Look, Jonathan Taylor has been their best running back lately. He makes the most sense to ride into the playoffs. I don't know if they're necessarily going to do that because they haven't done it all season. And really, Frank Reich hasn't done it during his entire career. So, hey, I think Taylor is the person now that we can rank highest in Fantasyland. And we were doing that earlier in the year, but just realized, this was still a game where late in the fourth quarter, Jordan Wilkins was getting some mop-up run. Nyheim Hines is still the pass-down back no matter what. I just don't think Jordan Wilkins is suddenly going to hit the bench for no reason in week 14 when he's still been, not someone that's been killing them or anything like that. I get Jonathan Taylor had a good game, but let's not, get that confused with the situation where we're immediately expecting him to take on some massive workload that we haven't seen handed out to him all season long. Quickly with the Houston running backs, David Johnson, 56% snaps, Duke Johnson, 55% snap. That means that they got these guys playing some wide receiver, which is good. They're both able to do it, and he got some wide receivers banged up. So David, 10 carries, 2 targets. Duke had 2 carries and 6 targets. Duke could actually be this kind of lower end flex. Look, we're still talking about fewer than 10 combined carries and targets, so don't get too carried away. But, with David still being, the lead running back, we're not going to be able to really embrace either guy as, a true RB2. Maybe David as a lower end touchdown dependent guy. He did find the end zone in this one, but just realize now with Duke being even more involved, it helps Duke a little bit, but more than anything, it just kind of takes away from the overall RB1 value in this offense. Maybe, next week with David being more than one game removed from the IR, we'll see him get back to that, 80-90% role, but this was not, super encouraging for what he'll be here moving on out. PFF Lilly stat of the matchup. So Jonathan Taylor, I mentioned that he's been playing a lot better. Now this is missed forced tackles on just carries, not even receptions. Weeks 1 through 10, he only had 9 total missed forced tackles on carries. Last 2 games alone, he has had 8. So truly, Jonathan Taylor, your eye test serves you correct. He is playing some of the best football of the season at this point. Next game, we got the Lions defeating the Bears 34-30. They came roaring back in this one. And, Mitch Trubisky, he got the L. Did not play good. I mean, look, he is pretty much the reason why they lost this game. It would make sense if he is benched because of that. Because, inside his own 10-yard line with all he needed to do on the third down was either try to complete it or just take the sack and you can punt it and, let your defense at least give him a somewhat long field. Instead of that, nope, he gets strip sacked in Detroit, gets the ball inside the 10-yard line and, a handoff to Adrian Peterson later, takes the lead at the end. So Mitch was able to drive them, pretty far down into Lion territory, but interesting, circumstances there at the end. He throws an out route to Allen Robinson. A-Rob should have gotten this first down. I'm not sure if he just didn't see the marker right or what happened, but he ended up backing out of bounds about a half yard short. David Montgomery got stuffed on fourth down. So truly, Trubisky, no picks, 2 sacks. He actually didn't even, he did lose the one fumble I mentioned about, but other than that fumble, which I understand, the fumble lost them the game. It's hard to say other than the one thing that completely ruined the evening. Other than that, though, you look at this game, and the Bears offense, this is 30 points. And last week, even against the Packers, again, Trubisky, too many mistakes, but they were at least putting up points. This is at least a step in the right direction from an offense that largely was unwatchable for the first, 3 months of the season outside of, that Falcons game in a spot here or there. So it was a big deal to do with the run game. It wasn't all on Trubisky. We saw Montgomery get 72 yards and a pair of scores. My guy Cordero Patterson had 59 yards on the ground and another score. But, Trubisky, he had some good strikes to Allen Robinson, who had 6 catches for 75 yards. Even Anthony Miller and Darnell Mooney to an extent. So I would like to see them stick with Trubisky, even though he hasn't really been using his legs all that much. I just think this team and this offense in particular does have a slightly higher ceiling with him under center. Foles might take care of the ball a little bit better, which I understand is important, but in fantasy and I think real life as well, the 2020 Bears just have a little higher ceiling with Trubisky under center, even if that ceiling probably isn't as more than an 8-8 squad. With the Bears running back snap count, so it was David Montgomery's show again, 76% snaps, 17 carries, 4 targets. Didn't bust any big runs, but, he was breaking tackles like he was all year. And now that, the Bears' 31st ranked offensive line and yards before contact per attempt was facing, truly in just an atrocious front seven with the Detroit Lions, we did see him actually finding some more room to run. So pitched in 39 yards receiving, mostly just on checkdowns, at the end of the game and, that comeback mode. But you know what? Those are the fancy-friendly opportunities you get when you're your team's 3-down back. So Montgomery getting closer and closer to that RB1 borderline. We've been calling him a volume-based RB2, but he has back-to-back RB1 weeks. Keep firing him up and starting him into the fantasy playoffs. I understand he's not Saquon Barkley, but he pretty much has Saquon Barkley's workload right now. So at least treat him as, a knockoff version because it's been pretty damn good for fantasy football business. With the Detroit Lions, Matthew Stafford, 402 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air, mostly to Marvin Jones, 8 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown. But we also saw Amendola, Quintez Cephas, and even TJ Hawkinson finish with between 60 and 85 receiving yards. So we're spreading it around. And, this was a game where no Kenny Golladay, no DeAndre Swift, no even Marvin Hall. So it was a situation where I wasn't sure how Stafford was going to move the ball without his top, field stretchers, without his main underneath option. And the answer was, other than a nice 49-yard touchdown down the field to Quintez Cephas, just a whole lot of deep chunks down the middle. I mentioned this before with Tannehill and Matt Ryan, but I think Stafford can fit that same pool as well sometimes just with his ability to just throw darts, in 20 yards. It seemed like him and Marvin Jones hooked up for 4 or 5 of those just right down the middle. So Marvin continues to ball without Kenny Golladay. Look, this was a, ceiling performance, I think, for the Lions without Golladay in the lineup. We've seen just a, general worst play from everyone involved without the number 1 receiver there this year. Maybe had some extra emotions without Patricia. I don't know. I didn't quite buy all that with how the defense performed, but you know what? Congrats, Detroit. You got to win. You got, the monkey off your back in the post-Patricia era. Good for you guys. Still don't think it's necessarily a team, again, without Golladay. It's been making too much noise, and I'm, not really going to be going back to the well too hard with Stafford as an upside, more than an upside QB2, unless Golladay gets back into the lineup. With his backfield, Adrian Peterson, 16 carries, 57 yards, and another 2 touchdown performance after he did so on Thanksgiving. He actually led the team in snaps this time, at least 47%, and this was even in a game, with them trailing for a good amount of the time. So Kerryon Johnson had been leading the team in snaps over the past 2 weeks, but he, wasn't too far behind, 44%, but only 3 targets and 3 carries in this one. So AP, whether we like it or not, is forcing his way into RB2 discussion. It's not pretty, but you know what? It wasn't pretty with Todd Gurley Gurley for the first 10 weeks of the season. He was an RB2. Hasn't exactly been that pretty with David Montgomery. We don't get style points in fantasy football. We should. It still does not make sense to me why a pop pass counts the same as a hurdle or a truck stick or an awesome stiff arm. I don't get it. You don't get it. It's the game we play, and Adrian Peterson right now is putting up a lot of points in the game that we love and call fantasy football. So AP, again, it's 2020. I thought we'd be done talking about this guy 3 years ago. We're not. As long as the Detroit Lions treat him as their RB1, we at least need to treat him as a lower end RB2 in fantasy football. It's wild, but at this point, he's getting too much volume to ignore, and he's not in an offense as bad as the Jets where we can just ignore him anyway. So AP, Matthew Stafford's RB1, needs to be treated as a legit top 24 option here moving forward as long as DeAndre Swift remains sidelined. PFF matchup stat. So in 8 games this year, Marvin Jones without Kenny Golladay, or, just he's played under 50% snaps. He got hurt in one of them. Marvin Jones in those games, 15.4 PPR points per game and 6 total touchdowns. And that even it doesn't include a 55-yard flea flicker for a touchdown that got nullified on a very iffy illegal formation penalty. So truly, like I'm saying, Adrian Peterson's, getting the volume to be in that actual RB2 conversation. I think Marvin Jones is also a legit low-end wide receiver too without Kenny Golladay. He's been proving it for about half the season already. Next game, we got the Vikings defeating the Jaguars 27-24. As someone that had I had the Vikings and then the freaking Raiders in a money line parlay that was not fetching me nearly enough money, as I had to sweat out pretty much watching them almost lose to the 2 worst teams in the league. Vikings in this one, it was more of a first half scare, and then like the first play of the second half, Cousins threw a pick 6, or if it wasn't the first play, it was very close into it. Wasn't exactly his fault. I mean, Dalvin Cook just didn't turn around, but I don't know. I'm not an NFL quarterback. Are you supposed to throw to receivers that haven't turned around yet? I know you got your timing routes and everything like that, but again, just an interesting play. And then on the goal line, when they were about to score later in the game, there was a fumbled exchange between Cousins and Cook. Again, it looked like it was Cousins' fault, but I don't know the exact details. It could have been a little bit on Cook as well. We'll chalk them both up to Cousins, whatever. He still played a pretty good game, everybody. He took 4 sacks, which we don't want to see, but 305 yards, 3 touchdowns. Kirk Cousins keeps more or less balling and putting up these numbers. And you know what? He's got Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen out there. And those are great guys. And Dalvin Cook, doing his best work with the screens. I know you wouldn't want another running back out there, but at some point, we got to start giving Cousins a little bit more credit for enabling all these guys to go off. I mean, don't forget, sometimes with I remember I made this mistake when Odell Beckham went from the Giants to, the Browns. We see these quarterbacks, particularly maybe if they're not quite as flashy as someone like Baker was as a rookie. And, we project them to, we don't give these veteran quarterbacks enough credit for enabling these great young wide receivers is the point I'm trying to make. Because I was someone that said, oh my God, OBJ without Eli is going to be so much better. I don't know. And to Kirk Cousins' credit, in Washington and now in Minnesota with Diggs, with Thielen, and now with Justin Jefferson, the guy sure has been responsible for a lot of great fantasy football and real life wide receivers. So you could say the wide receivers are making Kirk Cousins, and you might not be wrong. But at some point, as we continue to see more and more just high-end talents emerging in passing games led by Kirk Cousins, you got to look at the guy orchestrating it all and give him some credit. So this one wasn't all that easy. And, an overtime win against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay, we don't need to crown Kirk after his performance or anything like that. But just realize more weeks than not this year, Kirk Cousins has truly been playing some very good ball. With this Vikings backfield, Dalvin Cook, 87% snaps, 32 carries, 8 targets in a game that, he was potentially going to be eased in after just having the injury scare last week. Was not at all, just unfortunately couldn't find the end zone. So continue to treat Dalvin Cook as fantasy's number 1 overall running back moving forward. On the Jaguars side of things, Mike Glennon, good, not great game. I thought he played a little better last week, but either way, 280 yards, 1 touchdown. Did have a pair of interceptions and also lost a fumble, so hardly perfect. But you know what? The draft was out there slinging it. He was able to find Colin Johnson down the field, gave DJ Chark plenty of chances. No receiver ended up reaching 75 yards, but you know what? Spreading the ball around. And, it could have been a worse game. His 1 touchdown to Laviska Shenault was a play that was tipped and probably should have been intercepted. But, still, Mike Glennon at a minimum, everybody, for 2 games, he has led in a below average NFL offense. And that's all we need, because the only thing we care about in Jacksonville at this point, with all due respect to potential DJ Chark bounce backs, I think that could happen. The only thing worth a damn in Jacksonville all year long in Fantasyland has been James Robinson, and he kept keeping on. 18 carries, 78 yards, and a score in this one on the ground. Another 6 catches for 30 yards through the air, 84% snaps. James RB1 son has been every bit of the top 10 running back that we've wanted him to be all season long. He's going to be a legit top 5, top 6 option here moving forward. The better discussion, if you want to go back to this podcast from last Thursday, I had Evan Silva on from Established Run, and we were discussing, the best rookie running back going to 2021. It's going to be very interesting to watch what the Jacksonville Jaguars do with this running back room going into next year, because James Robinson hasn't done anything to not be the starting running back going to 2021. The question is, could someone come in and just make this somewhat of a committee? Because right now, with this role, if the Jaguars do nothing and they don't draft anyone in the top, 4 or 5 rounds, they get a new coach or whatever, but they commit to James Robinson as their lead guy. With this role right now, this is a top 5 role in fantasy football at the running back position. And credit to James Robinson. We've seen guys like Ezekiel Elliott, Joe Mixon's been hurt, bad example, but we'll stick with Zeke. We've seen guys lose their quarterback, become, just in this bad offense and not be able to produce. That has not been James Robinson. He hasn't been, the most efficient back in the league, but the fact he's even above average in this sort of, just general dumpster fire of an offense, just, all the respect in the world of James Robinson and what he's done this year despite not being dealt the best hand. And I just mean best hand in terms of, his actual surrounding cast, not the opportunity. He actually has been dealt the best hand in opportunity, believe it or not. PFF Lily matchup stat here. So this is in respect to Justin Jefferson, who had 121 yards, 9 catches, and a score. Also shout out Adam Thielen, 75 yards and a touchdown himself. And he hit the gritty after his touchdown. So him and Jefferson going back and forth. Love to see that. But PFF Lily stat, 83 players have at least 50 targets this season. Devontae Adams is number 1 with averaging 3.02 yards per route run. Number 2, Justin Jefferson, 2.87. Justin Jefferson is not just a great rookie wide receiver. He is a great NFL wide receiver, period. Already might legit be in that top 10 conversation. And the fact that he wasn't even his own college team's number 1 wide receiver can show you, 1, we have a lot to learn about player evaluation coming to the NFL. And 2, oh my gosh, Chase could be a freaking world beater. Cannot wait to see that guy come out here soon. Next matchup, we had the Saints defeat the Falcons 21-16. So Taysom Hill, we got to have the Taysom Hill discussion, everybody. First of all, do not be the person that suggests Breeze stays on the bench because of what Taysom Hill has done over the past 3 weeks. Taysom has produced 2 of the Saints' 3 lowest point totals this season, with 21 points in this one and 24 points against the Falcons a couple weeks ago. Previously, the Saints had not scored this few points, and you had to go back to their playoff game against the Vikings, which in that game, Taysom Hill was their brightest source of offense. So over the past 2 seasons, pretty much, at least past season and a half, their 3 worst scoring games have really come. 3 of their 4 worst scoring games have come with Taysom Hill, having his biggest roles that we've seen. This is not a bad offense with Taysom Hill under center. Do not confuse that. Sean Payton and Taysom himself deserve a great job for what Payton's now 8-0 without Drew Brees. And Taysom Hill, 232 yards, pair of touchdowns through the air, also had another 83 rushing yards. He's been a dual threat guy. And the Saints, I wrote an article about this on PFF.com last week, breaking down Kamara with Taysom Hill. And I want to be very clear that the Saints as an offense are still an above average unit. The problem is they've taken a nice jump in rushing ability in terms of EPA per play with Taysom under center compared to Breeze, but they've taken such a big back step in passing that it just hasn't been worth the change as a whole. And we've seen that reflected on the scoreboard with these 21, 24-point performances. So first of all, Hill's line, a little bit deceiving. He had 2 dropped interceptions and he fumbled not once, not twice, but 3 times, only lost 1. There were some drops and he completed his first 10 third down passes, and truly, I'll probably make some all 22 film later this week showing that he actually made some nice strikes down the field, notably to Michael Thomas, who had 105 yards, but even Emmanuel Sanders and Traquan Smith had some solid catches as well. It was just few and far between and just compounded by some just boneheaded mistakes. So Taysom, he's not giving us exactly this huge, just big play ceiling or anything like that. He had the 43-yard rush, but his longest completion on the day was just 21 yards to Traquan Smith. He's almost playing this game manager-esque role, but he's a very erratic game manager. So I don't know. It's a situation where we continue to see the Saints playing with positive game scripts. He hasn't had to, try to come from behind once yet. And, hey, credit to him for not being in a position to have to come from behind yet. Even though he had the 2 dropped interceptions, I guess he deserves some credit for not throwing a pick in this one. Only 2 sacks. So he's doing his thing. And, he's a hard guy to sack. So he presents different challenges. And again, this is not a below average offense by any stretch of the imagination with Taysom under center. Just realize it is nowhere near the ceiling they have with Drew Brees. And once he is healthy, which is hopefully next week, they should go back to him because Taysom continues to murder the high-end fantasy value of Alvin Kamara. He helped us out this week, 88 rushing yards and a touchdown, but still just 3 targets again, 2 catches for 9 yards for Alvin Kamara. I mean, again, a situation where Taysom is checking down at about half the rate of Drew Brees, the lowest rate in the league of checkdowns. He's also holding the ball just a really long time and then usually taking off instead of throwing to Kamara in those type of scramble drill situations as well. So Kamara, the one missed target was actually downfield. If Taysom had put the ball in him a little better, he could have had room to run. Kamara looked great rushing the ball, and Latavius Murray only had 5 carries for 17 yards despite playing 40% of the snaps. I mean, Alvin Kamara is going to still be getting, around 15 touches per game. It's almost like Antonio Gibson right now, but we just don't even have a J.D. McKissick to bitch about. It's just a Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill is our, J.D. McKissick. It's just a much better overall offense and a much better team. But that is the one player really limiting Kamara from rising to that, top 3 running back heights that we saw for most of the year. So credit Michael Thomas, clearing the century mark again. Still hasn't found the end zone, in a bit, but I still think he's going to be with Taysom, a wide receiver 2 versus a wide receiver 1 more weeks than not. But hey, credit to him for making the most out of his third quarterback in the past 2 years. For the amount of times that we make fun of Drew Brees for not being able to throw downfield, that never really seems to be given credit to Michael Thomas in these top wide receiver conversations. But I digress. Great win for the Saints. Their defense continues to kick ass, and Taysom, hey, he keeps winning. But again, I really hope Peyton doesn't make this switch because I truly do believe the Saints' overall ceiling is so much higher with Drew Brees under center, even if they can also be a winning football team with Taysom. Falcons side of the ball, they had Julio Jones back, playing through the pain, hobbling off the field a time or two, but stayed on out there playing through the hamstring pain. I think he might have even gotten diagnosed with a knee injury as well. But either way, 6 catches, 94 yards on 10 targets. Calvin Ridley had 5 catches for 108 yards on 10 targets. Kind of dropped a touchdown, wasn't able to get his feet in either way, but missed opportunity there. But then Matt Ryan probably had a better ball chance to Ridley as well. So it could have been a bigger performance from him. Either way, Calvin Ridley is a pretty much undefeated streak of putting up solid fantasy performances with at least 8 targets lives on. Not the best game for Matt Ryan, 273 yards and a touchdown, on 39 attempts, but less than 50% completion rate. Just realized the Saints defense, since their bye, only the Rams have been better in terms of EPA allowed per play. Truly playing some great ball, and even not having Janoris Jenkins out there, we saw Marshawn Lattimore trying to make life tough on Calvin Ridley, even though Lattimore is losing a lot of those battles. And just in general, the Saints pass rush was making life tough on Ryan, as they had really for the majority of their opponents throughout the year. Backfield in Atlanta was a complete mess. Ito Smith did suffer a head injury, I think, at the end, so keep an eye on that. But look, the reasons we got behind Todd Gurley earlier in this year were because he was getting literally 15 plus touches every single game. And, usually in the carries, it wasn't a ton of targets, but it was a higher scoring Falcons offense. But Gurley, as the undisputed bell cow back, that is no longer the case, people. Todd Gurley, don't cut him because maybe this, changes in a week or two, but he is not someone that should be in your starting fantasy football lineup in week 14, really under any circumstances. Ito Smith led the way here, 37% snaps. Gurley was just at 30%. Brian Hill at 17%. Ito had 8 carries. Brian Hill had 5. Gurley had 8. And Ito had 2 targets compared to just 1 for Gurley. So before it was Brian Hill, sticking his nose in his way a little bit. Now it's Brian Hill and Ito Smith, and they're taking away the rush attempts. I mean, usually this was a situation where they were the pass down backs. Now Gurley's not even getting that. So this is before even pointing out that Gurley does not look anywhere close to 100%. Really hasn't for the whole season, but at least in the first month or so, he showed some burst. That was gone in this one. So Saints are the best defense in the league in PPR points per game allowed to opposing RBs. But either way, it's the volume distribution that makes Gurley a non-starter for pretty much anybody here moving forward. PFF Philly matchup stat, I got to go back to Alvin Kamara's situation. In weeks 1 through 10, Alvin Kamara had 78 targets. That was tied for 9th among all players in the league. In weeks 11 through 13, with Taysom Hill under center, Alvin Kamara has 3 freaking targets. Or is it 4? 4 targets. Tied for 165th, people. Not great. Not great at all. Some would even say bad. Next matchup, 4 o'clock games now. Rams beat the Cardinals 38-28. Credit to Jared Goff on, kind of coming back, just throwing a lot of short stuff, and it seemed to really be a focus on getting the ball out quick. There weren't many downfield opportunities. 37 for 47, 351 yards, but only that's 7.5 yards per attempt. So certainly wasn't a game where we saw Josh Reynolds or Van Jefferson really get loose downfield at all. But hey, when you got Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp who can get open against pretty much anyone underneath intermediate areas of the field, why not? Woods caught 10 of 11 targets for 85 yards. Kupp caught 8 of 9 targets, 73 yards. Even Gerald Everett caught 6 of 7 targets for 40 44 yards. So seems like this new look Rams offense, they're almost embracing like a Steelers-esque mentality where their running back might get 15 to 20 carries, but in the passing game, it's going to be short stuff to your talented wide receivers on the outside with their quarterback, trying not to take sacks, trying not to make mistakes. And Jared Goff, he needed, just a no turnover game after making all sorts of mistakes over the past few weeks. I added a QB sneak as well. So this was a good performance from him in fantasy land and in real life. So we'll see. Similar to Baker Mayfield, like nothing Jared Goff did in this game was like stuff that he had never done before, and we just love seeing it. But hey, he had a good game. We got to give him credit for that. And fantasy land, he's still not going to be much more than a boom or bust QB2 more weeks than not. But we have seen more of a willingness in LA to embrace his passing game, which is going to make Woods and Kupp continue to be upside wide receiver 2s as opposed to those lower end options that we thought they were in the more run first version of this offense. I want to talk about this backfield. Cam Akers led the way, 65% snaps, 21 carries, 1 target. Darrell Henderson, 20% snaps, 3 carries, 3 targets. Malcolm Brown all the way down at 15% snaps, 3 carries, 1 target. Here's the problem, everybody. Henderson suffered a knee injury in the first half. He did not play for most of the first half, even though he started the game. Then Henderson came out. He had 3 carries for 49 yards and a touchdown. He busted off a nice 38-yard touchdown run that I think if Akers had done, people would be paying a lot more attention to. Akers played well. I think Akers has looked like their best running back since their bye. With Henderson dealing with a quad injury and now a knee injury, he hasn't seemingly been 100%. Malcolm Brown is pretty much out of the picture in terms of threatening the carrier target lead. He's still maintaining involvement. He still, could see his snaps go up more. They trust him as, a pass down guy and a short yardage guy, but it makes sense that Akers and Henderson at the top. Just don't be expecting Akers to all of a sudden take on the Todd Gurley role and completely take over it. Again, Henderson was hurt in the first half, and we need to mention this when we're breaking down this backfield. We can't just look at the total touch distribution and say, wow, Akers completely touched it, because a lot of those touches were coming in the first half. So hey, Akers has played well. He's earned more, touches, but don't tell me this 3.4 yards per carry effort was something that was just so much better than anything Henderson or anyone has achieved all season long. It was like a month ago that we were talking about how Henderson has looked like the best running back for the Rams. And truthfully, in the first couple weeks of the year, you could probably say that about Malcolm Brown. So the only, consistency in this Rams backfield has been inconsistency, and we got to be careful about, expecting that to change just because of one good game from Cam Akers. We've seen good games from Malcolm Brown, from Darrell Henderson. We've seen good games from Cam Akers earlier this year, where he was then relegated back to the bench for prolonged stretches. So again, Sean McVay, a very smart guy, far smarter than I will ever be, and he's going to go out there and do his thing, and it's been successful. And the Rams sitting at 8-4, they just hung 38 points on the Cardinals. I'm just not convinced in a year where he has continuously told us they like all 3 backs, they continue to use all 3. I'm not convinced Cam Akers has just seized control of this backfield in a game where we continue to not see him used all that much as a receiver, although he did have a nice 22-yard catch and run on a screen. I just don't know if they trust him yet to handle his 3-down role, because they haven't trusted anybody to handle that 3-down role ever since Todd Gurley left. So Akers, hey, he's my number 1 ranked Rams running back next week, but it's going to be far closer to that RB, 24, RB 25 line, at that RB2 borderline, as opposed to the RB 12, RB 13 line where the RB 1s rest. With the Cardinals, Kyler Murray, another game where he just wasn't running the ball. That shoulder injury clearly, impacting his mindset, not impacting his legs. He can obviously still run fast with a hurt shoulder, but just his 3rd straight game with only 5 carries. It's a no-go in fantasy land. I don't want to compare every situation to Alvin Kamara. God, Taysom Hill is haunting my dreams at this point, people. But it is really like Alvin Kamara in the sense that Kyler Murray, like Kamara, can be a great fantasy asset purely on his passing ability. And he did throw 3 touchdowns in this one, even though it was only 173 yards. The problem is, he goes from a lower-end QB1 to the overall QB1, who was once averaging earlier this season the most fantasy points per game at the position in a single season ever. That was all because of his insanely wild rushing floor. So you take away the rushing floor for Kyler, just like you take away targets for Kamara, you just don't have the same fantasy asset, and we need to adjust accordingly. Kyler is going to be someone that's going to have to work his way back into the top 5 at the position. With these running backs, Kenyon Drake, 10 carries, 49 yards, and a score. Kenyon Drake's been playing some good ball lately, people. I understand that, Chase Edmonds has been probably playing better on the season as a whole, but I don't think it's a situation where we should just be crying foul that Drake continues to work ahead of Chase Edmonds. I mean, particularly in the receiving game, we see some good things from Drake over the past few weeks. And, it's not like he's going out there. I don't think we should be looking back at this game going, man, if only Chase Edmonds had been out there instead of Kenyon Drake, this could have been a whole different picture for the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals. But, Drake has been playing a little bit better recently. And in fantasy land, guys, coming in this game, PPR RB14. So I understand he's let us down on the season as a whole, but he's coming on strong. And with Kyler not running as much, we've seen, Drake's targets and carries continue to be in a very good place. So Edmonds, with his just, more limited workload, he's nothing more than a lower end flex play in the kind of Duke Johnson mold. Drake, though, is going to continue to be that, upper end RB2 as long as he continues to see these sort of carries and goal line carries without Kyler really using that running game as much as we know his talents have in him with these passing game. So Dan Arnold had a 59-yard touchdown early on where pretty much the entire defense sucked up to Hopkins, and Kyler was able to hit Arnold. After that, though, his only other completion that went over 10 yards was to Keyshawn Johnson. That was only 12 yards. So Kyler Murray just couldn't get anything going consistently down the field. DeAndre Hopkins, 8 catches, 52 yards, and 1 touchdown. Hey, it was a nice touchdown pass and everything. And we also saw Arnold get another nice touchdown from the goal line. But it's just very hard to move the ball up and down the field without any sort of explosive plays. Kenyon Drake had a 27-yard run, but usually Kyler has given us those explosive plays on the ground as well. So I think that's probably the main issue we've seen from the Cardinals offense really throughout the past 2 years. This is that inability to consistently create explosive plays. Christian Kirk, 1 catch for 2 yards. Andy Isabella, 2 catches for 7 yards. These are the guys that they want to be able to create big plays downfield. Just haven't quite been able to do anything in this passing game consistently other than feed DeAndre Hopkins. So look, this was a matchup against probably the best defense in the entire league in the Los Angeles Rams. Don't sweat it too much. Just realize, this Cardinals offense still not quite in that, world-beating form that we know they have a chance of reaching some point in the near future. PFF Lilly matchup stat. So, I want to talk about these Rams backfield because Darrell Henderson remains the highest graded PFF running back on the Rams. Give credit to Akers. He has a better, missed forced tackle rate, and he has, is averaging more yards after contact per attempt, but only 4 targets on the year for Cam Akers, 26 for Malcolm Brown, 22 for Darrell Henderson. Akers is playing well, but again, maybe cool off the breakout party talks. Next matchup, this one likely cost you some money if you're a gambling man, or maybe not. Maybe you're just smarter than me. But Giants 17, Seahawks 12. Man, I just did not see this one coming, everybody. And apparently neither did the Seahawks and Russell Wilson. 27 for 43, 263 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, but 5 sacks taken. Also saw Russ lose a fumble. I mean, again, even like Russ's bad games, they're not, saying a Russ bad game is like a Jared Goff bad game just doesn't add up. But still, this was anyone's idea of a bad game from Russ. He hit Chris Carson on a 28-yard touchdown where he was rolling out to his left, and he found him. And look, Carson dropped a couple balls too, and Metcalf had to drop down the middle. Like, it wasn't a perfect game by any stretch, but we just didn't see a bunch of big plays out of this passing game. I mean, no completions of at least 30 yards or more. And I know it's a little bit of an arbitrary number, but come on, we're used to seeing Metcalf rip off a couple of those per week potentially. It's been, now close to a month, if not longer, that we've seen Lockett have, a true breakout performance, and it was against a Giants defense that is good. Maybe we're not giving them enough credit, but I just thought, Russell Wilson company were capable of overcoming even the best defenses because of, the extent that they were cooking. But we haven't quite seen that same, higher version of Russell Wilson and the Seahawks offense for, the better part of the last 5 weeks. So don't want to spoil the PFF Lilly stat, but this has not been the same Russell Wilson of late. Give a lot of credit to James Bradbury for making life tough on DK Metcalf and just, the New York Giants as a whole, even though, they did have I find it hilarious. Like, Joe Judge comes over as, a big special teams guy and all that. Last week they played the Bengals. They gave up a kick return touchdown. They gave up another punt return to Alex Erickson, the 50-yard line that almost lost in that game. And then this game, they have a punt blocked before halftime that the Seahawks, oh my gosh, they end up only getting the safety. They had like 3 guys there. The Seahawks had just fell on that punt in the end zone before halftime. Could have been a different game. Alas, they didn't. But just hilarious that the Giants, really, despite these crucial special teams mishaps over the past 2 weeks, have found ways to win. First, a game against a brutal Bengals team, but now a game on the road against, anyone's idea of a great team in the Seattle Seahawks. So, maybe great is a strong word. I don't know. These Seahawks certainly don't look like the same world beaters we saw in the first half of the season, but, either way, we cannot take too much away from the Giants win here. I don't want to sit here and be like, Russell Wilson played awful. This is all on the Seahawks. Like, no, the Giants won this game, even though they freaking made some mistakes themselves and they hardly put forth the best offensive effort. So, give the Giants credit for forcing the Seahawks to play to this level. I don't think, I don't think this is going to be the new norm for the Seahawks or anything like that. This was, Russ's worst game of the season. But honestly, we do need to look at the New York Giants defense and, treat them as, the more than above average, honestly, as the great unit that they've been for the better part of the last month at a minimum. With the Seattle backfield, Chris Carson got up to a 59% snap rate, 13 carries, 6 targets. I caught some flack on Twitter last week because they pulled one of my quotes from this podcast, talking this thing for like 4 or 5 hours, and then they pull out one quote and everyone on Twitter goes bonkers. But I'm not even backing down from it. But all I said was that Carson and Hyde could be approaching a 50-50 split, because last week Hyde was actually a 60% back and Carson was like the 35% guy. I know that was Carson's first game back from injury. And if you look at the whole quote, I'm saying Carson will be the RB1 here, obviously, and then Carlos Hyde having a hamstring injury throughout this week, threw away any talks of that. But just realize Rashad Penny is supposed to be coming back to practice this week. And last year, when Penny and Carson were healthy together, it was really, truly a 50% situation going back and forth. And if we haven't seen that in a while, maybe Rashad Penny, isn't going to be able to come back and even get activated. We need to see that, him be in the picture before we need to worry about him. I understand that. But if Carson is healthy with a healthy Hyde or Penny, we have evidence of them splitting snaps, at least more so than we saw in the earlier parts of last year. I mean, Carson, he caught the touchdown, but before that, 13 carries and, he only had 6 total targets. He caught 3 of them. So the 6 targets is fine as long as he is getting, the main goal line touches and the nice pass down role in the Seahawks offense. He's going to have some solid scoring upside, but it's the difference between kind of being a borderline RB1 and being a top 5, top 6 back that we've seen him function as over the years. Now on this Giants offense, so Colt McCoy, gritty, just gym rat performance by him. Come on, 105 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He made a nice throw to Evan Ingram on one of their last drives. The interception was off Ingram's hands, so we shouldn't hate on him too much. But this was just not a game where Colt McCoy was asked to do much of anything, and then he didn't do much in the opportunities he was presented. So nobody had over 35 receiving yards. Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton just 1 reception each. Like, come on, man. None of these guys are going to be viable fantasy options as long as Daniel Jones remains sidelined. And even Daniel Jones, when he comes in, I mean, one of my points in my QB rankings article last week, which why I didn't want to stream McCoy, was that, Daniel Jones going into this week was 24th in fantasy points per game on pure passing production. This passing game has really been broken all year long. I like Shepard. I like Tate. And I love Golden Tate. He's been one of my favorite players of the last decade. Shepard and Slayton specifically are talented wide receivers. I'm just not, I don't trust, one, mainly Jason Garrett's ability to really scheme them to any sort of success, and 2, the erraticness of Daniel Jones sometimes, especially when pressure gets to him, and Colt McCoy from what we've seen so far. So as long as Colt McCoy stays under center, stay the hell away from everyone this passing game, except maybe Evan Ingram. Even then, we're talking a borderline tight end 1. With this backfield, Wayne Gallman busted off a 60-yard run, looked good out there, 16 carries, 135 yards. Unfortunately, everybody, Alfred Morris vultured the goal line score. So this is why we were a little bit late getting around to Wayne Gallman, on this podcast in terms of waiver wire option, because they continue to use Alfred Morris on with goal line work and Dion Lewis, and the pass down stuff. So Alfred Morris 20% snaps in this one, Dion Lewis 22%, Wayne Gallman 49%. So it truly is a 3-back committee. Gallman's the clear lead guy, but we're not getting any targets for him, and it's just a situation where the early down short yardage stuff at the goal line is just as likely to go to Gallman as it is to Alfred Morris. So Gallman's still the clear RB1 with the Giants, but this is why he's remaining a clear, closer to that RB20, RB24 range as opposed to anything higher. We cannot trust these committees, with 3 running backs as far as we can throw them. PFF Lily matchup stat. So the first 8 games of the year, Russell Wilson did not have a PFF grade under 75. He's had 3 under 70 in the last 5 weeks against the Bills, Rams, and now the Giants. So the 6.1 yards per attempt he averaged this week was a new season low mark, despite him holding on to the ball as long as he has all year long. Just again, it was an absence of the usual Russ magic that almost no other quarterback can create, but we expect it from Russ, just didn't see it in this one. Thank you, as always, for listening to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Everybody, 3 more matchups. Patriots freaking blanked the Chargers 45-0. It was maybe the most underwhelming offensive performance we've ever seen in a 45-0 game, which, I mean, okay, it wasn't like Cam Newton and company couldn't move the ball at all. He engineered some touchdown drives, but only 69 passing yards and a short goal line score in N'Keal Harry. Give Cam credit, 14 carries, 48 yards, 2 touchdowns. He still gave us some fancy goodness with that rushing production, but certainly wasn't, a massive bounce back spot that we were waiting for from this passing game. I did love seeing Cam get his swagger back when he scored, and then the other guys. I'm a Cam stan, everybody, so got to take a little bit of my analysis with him with a grain of salt sometimes, but I just like seeing when this dude's happy. Football is more fun with Cam Newton in it, but unfortunately, with this Patriots passing game looking the way it does, we cannot trust any of these receivers, Jacoby Myers, N'Keal Harry, even freaking Gunnar Olszewski, who's now just the best punt returner in the league. Apparently, he scored a touchdown with Jarrett Stidham under center later in the game. No, cannot trust any of these wide receivers. Do not start them in any fantasy football format. at here throughout the fantasy football playoffs. And honestly, the running game's looking pretty much the same way. We thought we had a 2 running back backfield in New England, but Bill Belichick has freaking screwed us once again. Damon Harris, 48% snaps, Sony Michel, 33%, James White, 29%. Even though Damian Harris was getting most of the first half work, he had 16 carries. Sony Michel only had 10. Cam Newton stole the goal line touchdowns. We already know he's going to steal the goal line touchdowns. And James White, with the few times they do throw the running backs, is going to be the guy that usually gets those targets. So with that happening, it's already a rough enough role for Damian Harris. It's not like that when things go right, he's an RB1. When things go right, he's usually an RB2. And now we add Sony Michel to take him away from that, 25 rush attempt potential and keep him around the 16 we saw. No, Damon Harris is someone that's not going to be a recommended start because we now see proof that the Patriots are willing to go back to Sony Michel as in a 3 RB committee system. And honestly, James White's going to be pretty impossible to get behind as well. Only 4 targets in this one. He caught 3 of them, but clearly they do not, feel any need to make James White, just a feature part of their passing game. And again, 3 backs instead of 2. Can't do it, everybody. With these Chargers, now Justin Herbert, man, just the floor game of all floor games here. Going in this game, Justin Herbert had at least 300 passing yards and or 3 total touchdowns in every game this year. Just 209 yards, no scores, 2 interceptions, and this one did not chip in any sort of rushing contribution. Just a brutal game from Justin Herbert. Look, he was getting pressured. He took 3 sacks, but I think more than anything, they just weren't hitting those big plays we're used to seeing. He was trying deep shots to Mike Williams, Jalen Guyton. They got close a few times, but ultimately no completions over 25 yards. Keenan Allen, 5 catches, 48 yards, was having a tough time separating from Stephon Gilmore. Mike Williams, only 4 catches, 43 yards. So really, I think we've seen them, Tyron Johnson, Jalen Guyton, even these complimentary receivers you might not know as well. They've been able to manufacture big passing plays because of some of the heroics Herbert's been able to pull off. Just wasn't going in this one. And, situation where I think the Chargers have not done him any favors schematically. A lot of the stuff that he has been able to do has almost been, schoolyard, just avoiding oncoming rushers and making the most out of it. A lot of screens on the table too. So again, hardly, the best offensive effort put forth by Anthony Lynn and company, but no doubt about it, the worst game we have seen from Herbert to this point. I'm not freaking out. We saw the Miami Dolphins and Brian Flores give him a lot of trouble a couple weeks ago. Bill Belichick and company were able to, pretty much play the same defense against him and cause that. So he's got to figure it out, but still surrounded by Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, and these guys. I'm still comfortable firing up Herbert as a top 6, at a minimum top 8 fantasy QB the rest of the way, even though this performance obviously didn't go the way we wanted. In the backfield, Austin Eckler, 61% snaps, 8 carries, 6 targets. Kalen Ballage, 37% snaps, 7 carries, 4 targets. Joshua Kelly was pretty much out of the picture. Snaps would have been a little bit more in Eckler's favor if the Chargers had a little bit more positive game script, but either way, it's not concerning. We still saw Eckler get 9 targets. Unfortunately, only caught 4 of them for 32 yards, but in the post-Melvin Gordon era here, they're not going to give Eckler 25 carries a game. That's fine. We have Austin Eckler for his Alvin Kamara role, which is, 12 to 15 carries, more weeks than not. I know he didn't get this one, but 12 to 15 carries and then hopefully 10 plus targets, and who freaking knows how much receiving production they could get. So that's why we have Austin Eckler. He didn't quite get in this one, but make no mistake about it, they're going to keep throwing him the ball. This remains, the freaking least competition he's really ever had to deal with. Austin Eckler, they have 24 million reasons to continue to feature him, and he's their best running back. Don't give me this Kalen Ballage. We already talked about Joshua Kelly earlier this year, coming in and unseating Austin Eckler. I realize it was more Ballage than we wanted to see, but do not get it twisted. Austin Eckler remains a fantasy RB1 moving forward, and he's going to be in my top 5, top 6 again in week 14. I'm not letting this performance get in my, line of Austin Eckler stand-em at all. Quick notes here with this game. Just realize, again, I mentioned it being a 45-0 win that just didn't feature much offensive goodness. Gunnar Olszewski is looking like the freaking best punt returner in the league. This freaking small white dude that weighs, 180 pounds, dripping wet. And the reason I say white dude, there's a hilarious picture of him in the locker room after a game last year, I think against the Jets, where he had his coming out party. It was like a 1 catch and a touchdown, but he was just sitting there in the locker room in a wife beater with a giant dip in, just looking like a good old, country boy. It's just hilarious some of the guys the Patriots can find to throw the ball to some of these days. But Gunnar, freaking punt return for a touchdown this week. Last week he had a punt return for a touchdown get nullified, and then he took another punt return back, this one inside the 10-yard line. So it's hardly like he's, Dante Hall out there making just ridiculous moves. But Gunnar, hey, the production's coming, man. And especially today's NFL, we don't see, this sort of punt return goodness. So give Gunnar all the credit in the world for these big big plays, helps scored one touchdown, helped set up another. And then also the Patriots blocked a field goal at the end of the first half and brought that back for a touchdown. So 3 freaking scores directly, brought on by special teams play. Gotta love it and gotta hate it if you are the Los Angeles Chargers coaching staff. PFF Lily stat of the matchup. So Cam Newton, you say we will about his passing stats, haven't been great. Tough to, really remove that from the situation and the cards he's been dealt, but whatever, we're talking rushing here. This season on the ground, Cam Newton, 106 carries, 435 yards, 11 rushing touchdowns. For his projected 15-game total, because he missed a game, 145 carries, 593 yards, 15 touchdowns. That's career best carry and touchdown marks and his most rushing yards since 2017. I feel like the big concern coming into this year was, hey, is Cam still the same sort of athlete to give us the high-end rushing production that we've seen in the past? In reality, we've gotten the rushing production we wanted, hasn't quite been the same passing floor, but I'm not convinced that that's gone because, we look at this Patriots offense, and I understand Cam hasn't quite been the solution to the passing game because they haven't found any solution to it, but I don't think he's been the problem as well. They need to surround him with some semblance of high-end receivers. Obviously, we saw someone like Tom Brady, who's a pretty smart guy, not want to wait around and deal with it. So Cam, even though the passing hasn't been great, realize the rushing has been as good as ever, and the passing is not exactly all on him. Next matchup, we had the Packers defeat the Eagles 30-16. This was a beatdown really from, the beginning. Philly got up early, but Packers, built that 14-3 halftime lead, and it was 20-3 by the end of the third quarter. So Jalen Hurts came in, got a touchdown, and then Jalen Reagor took a pump back. So briefly had a chance to maybe make things interesting, but Aaron Jones had a nice dagger 77-yard touchdown run. But realize Aaron Rodgers, 295 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air. Should have been around 350 yards. He threw a bomb, seriously, maybe one of the longest balls just thrown the entire league this year to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who dropped it. 55, 60-yard bomb just dropped. Don't hit on MVS too much. He had an awesome downfield block on that Aaron Jones touchdown, but certainly not the first time this year. We've seen some air yards left on the field at the account of Marquez Valdes-Scantling. But Aaron Rodgers stays balling, and honestly, if he's going to be playing like this, I know he had the stinker against Tampa Bay that 1 week, but man, tough to see anyone in this wide open NFC knocking off Green Bay if Aaron Rodgers is going to be on top of his game, particularly with Devontae Adams, 10 catches, 121 yards, and a pair of scores. Darius Slay tried to guard him. Darius Slay nobody can guard Devontae Adams. He'll remain fantasy's overall wide receiver 1. Also, shout out Robert Tonyan catching a touchdown. He is, fantasy's a legit top 5 tight end. He had the 3 touchdown game earlier in the year, carrying a lot of that weight, but as we've seen over the past 3 weeks, he can still find the end zone in this, later season edition of the Packers. So continue to fire up Adams and Tonyan as the highest of end fantasy options. Same thing with Aaron Jones. We did see Aaron Jones separate himself a little bit from Jamal Williams here. And this, we only see Jamal Williams really get close to the same amount of touches as Aaron Jones and massive blowouts, or when Devontae and legit wide receivers are out. But in this one, Aaron Jones, 66% snaps, 16 carries, 3 targets. Jamal is at 34%, 5-2. So Jones, every week RB1. Williams, nothing more than a high-end handcuffed, super weak, low-end flex option. With the Eagles, Carson Wentz had 5 drives. He took 4 sacks, 79 passing yards, and honestly, it was even worse than that. He got Dallas Goedert on a 41-yard, kind of broken play, blown coverage situation. But other than that, just nothing was going for Carson Wentz. It was almost merciful if they took him out at this point for Jalen Hurts. And credit to Hurts. I think this is going to be someone that we really want to pay attention to in fantasy football land, because in just one half of work, even less than that, considering when they took Wentz out, Jalen Hurts racked up 5 carries for 29 yards and also 109 yards and a touchdown through the air, and had a couple sacks along the way. So he threw a pick at the end, trying to do his thing, down 2 scores. But really, I've been impressed with what we've seen from Hurts as a passer. He had a bomb down the sideline to Jalen Reagor for 34 yards that was perfectly thrown. And then 4th and 18, he rolled out of the pocket to his right and hit Greg Ward for a 32-yard score. So really, I understand that he's not going to be anywhere near the type of polished passer that he'll need to eventually be to succeed in the NFL. But we don't need him to be that right now, because this Eagles offense is, in all likelihood going to embrace, if they decide to go on with Jalen Hurts, they're going to embrace a more run-heavy approach with Jalen Hurts' dual threat talents as the focus of it. And as we have seen in fantasy football, everybody having that sort of dual threat option under center is a fantasy football cheat code. So, I'm not sure if they're going to make the total move, but I'd be shocked at this point if we see Wentz back under center in a full, one one QB capacity, Jalen Hurts is someone that you might want to consider signing down the fantasy playoff stretch if you're in a 2 QB league, because again, that rushing upside is a cheat code. And as we saw, like with 2018 Lamar Jackson, he was still returning, QB1 value, even though his passing progression wasn't anywhere near what we saw in 2019 and even 2020. So it doesn't make much sense. Again, fantasy football isn't always, a game that reflects what we want to see in terms of, real life goodness. But just realize Jalen Hurts has that sort of fantasy friendly dual threat, skill set that's going to make him, a legit potential top 12 option down the way if they do decide to part ways with Carson Wentz in terms of him being their starter. With this backfield, Miles Sanders played 59% of snaps, 10 carries, 1 target. Boston Scott, 22% snaps, 2 carries, 2 targets. And Jordan freaking Howard making this a 3-back committee, 19% snaps, 4 carries. If Jalen Hurts is under center, I think we see Miles Sanders, get closer to 15, 20 targets. But now that's hurting his pass down work. He's going to be a low-end RB2 here moving forward. Not necessarily because of his talents, although he hasn't done, a ton of his opportunities as of late, but just because Boston Scott's coming in when they get down a lot. And now with Jordan Howard potentially taking away some short yardage work, not good for Miles Sanders. It's unfortunate it's turned out this way, everybody. PFF Lowly matchup stat. Aaron Rodgers has thrown, so this is Aaron Rodgers when he's thrown at least 20 yards downfield, has a league high 1,117 passing yards, 10 touchdowns versus 1 interception, league high 27 big time throws, and just 3 turnover worthy plays. I was saying, earlier in the year, Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf was the, scariest thing when you see that ball leave your television screen and you're wondering who it's going to and you see it's Metcalf. I'll still say that's number 1, but man, oh man, Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, if that's not number 1, again, it's probably there right number 2. This is, just the most, as Danny Kelly from The Ringer likes to call it, Devontae Adams is inevitable, and that's what, you pretty much see every single time when you're going through these Green Bay Packer passing. And it's just absolutely wild just how easy they continuously make it look week after week after week. Adams, he had that Lions game where he got hurt, and then he had the Tampa Bay game in his first game back. Other than that, has scored in every single game this season. It is truly inevitable when we're talking about Devontae Adams in his Packers passing game. Final one of the night, Sunday Night Football. The Chiefs beat the Broncos 22-16. Patrick Mahomes, we've seen him look actually human against the Broncos in the past, but even in this one, wasn't exactly, a down performance by any stretch of the imagination. He's never really had a down performance, which is absolutely wild, but hey, we are talking about, in my opinion, the likely GOAT in the future. I don't want to get too far ahead of it, but come on, Patrick Mahomes at this very second is playing quarterback at a higher level than I think anyone that has ever done it. 318 yards and a touchdown. He had one deep shot to Tyreek Hill that I think it was more on Mahomes. Again, it's tough to tell because I'm not an NFL quarterback or wide receiver, but open Tyreek. One of the things that's so good about Tyreek is his ability to kind of track balls downfield. Wasn't able to get this one. Kind of had to change, his viewpoint. Again, I think it was on Mahomes' fault. We'll say it was. Then Tyreek Hill gets hit in the chest on 50-yard pass, freaking pops up in the air. Tyreek Hill accidentally catches the football. Everyone is shocked. No one thinks he caught it, not even the coaches, and they send out their punt team and they punt it before anyone can realize that, holy crap, Tyreek Hill actually just caught that ball. And then number 3, he does actually finally complete a touchdown pass to Tyreek Hill for about 48 yards. Tyreek Hill scores and everything, nullified on a holding call. So not 1, not 2, but 3 potential 50-yard touchdowns to Tyreek Hill ultimately did not come to fruition. Again, I think one was Mahomes' fault. One, you could argue, wouldn't have happened because of the hold. And the other one should have been a touchdown, but the NFL didn't, deem it to be, and the Chiefs did not go ahead and call it. So, quiet 318 yards and a touchdown from Patrick Mahomes in a performance that largely featured, the same sort of just ridiculous goodness that we've largely seen from him ever since he got, his true first run as a starter in 2018. With these wide receivers, Travis Kelce, tight end, wide receiver, whatever you want to call him. Nobody can guard Travis Kelce. 8 catches, 136 yards, and a score. Tyreek, again, 6 catches, 58 yards, also chipped in 38 yards on the ground. So, you end up getting 88 total yards. Not hardly the worst, performance to see, but realize it could have been so much more. Sammy Watkins, 35 yards. DeMarcus Robinson, 39 yards. It's Tyreek and Kelce. Mahomes has really been willing to just feed these two guys the ball over just about anybody else. Continue to fire them up. Kelce, obvious tight end 1. Tyreek, top 3 wide receiver on a weekly basis. That probably is a little bit closer to 2 the more we look at DeAndre Hopkins, just a little bit struggling with the Arizona Cardinals. With this run game, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, He was out there, apparently emergency only with the, flu, non-COVID symptoms. But this is a tough situation. This is probably going to lead to people not playing guys when they're active after the flu. Ideally, we could have gotten some more inside information about this, from some of the reporters and beat writers who, it's their job to try to find us these sort of hints. But unfortunately, that was not the case. So it is what it is. Le'Veon Bell, 58% snaps, 10 carries, 3 targets. Didn't look particularly good with any of them. Darrell Williams, 6 carries, 38 yards. Look a little bit better out there, 40% snaps. So was, a two-back committee. We saw Darrell Williams getting legit fourth quarter run. That seemed to almost be a case where he was more effective than Le'Veon, and because of that, he was getting more of the work in the fourth quarter. So, if Clyde remains sidelined, which I understand he was active, but let's say we know for sure he's out next week. Le'Veon, he's going to be more of a borderline RB2. And honestly, Darrell Williams is someone that's going to be a low-end RB3. So we want Clyde back. He'll be, a lower-end RB2 himself. It's just wild that the Chiefs can be this good on offense without really using a running back all that much. Just realize there's going to be scoring opportunities to go around. And Clyde on the season has still put up really good numbers. It's just a little more muddled than it was originally, which is annoying. But, do not rage drop Clyde Edwards-Helaire or anything like that. He is still the lead running back for the freaking best offense in the league when he is healthy enough to get out there. With the Broncos, Drew Lock, 151 yards, 2 touchdowns, pair of interceptions. First one was really brutal on the first drive of the game. Might have been the second. Second interception just at the end of the game, trying to get them down there and force the pass that Honey Badger jumped in front of. So don't necessarily fault him for that. Look, this was a 16-19 game in the fourth quarter before the Broncos ended up punting, when they had a drive going. So Drew Lock kept him in it to an extent, found Tim Patrick for 2 well-thrown touchdowns, and also got Noah Fant 57 yards as well. So, KJ Hamler was making some stuff happen short. Melvin Gordon had 131 yards on the ground. It was hardly like Drew Lock was just consistently having these tight window throws down the field. But we've seen a couple performances from him like this where he didn't take a sack. He didn't have a fumble. Like Drew Lock, his decision making needs so much work throwing the ball. Again, I've called him, AFC West Jameis before, but you look at what he can actually do in terms of that arm strength. He can make any throw on the field, and he's so good at maneuvering the pocket sometimes and actually getting outside of it and not taking these brutal sacks. He's hardly someone that's going to be a statue. So he can move. He's got the arm. We just doesn't quite know what to do with it yet. So it reminds me of, a younger Josh Allen, and just realize people this is still start number 12 or 13. I get it. We saw far more from guys like Patrick Mahomes and everything well before this point, but not every quarterback is going to be Patrick Mahomes and be a freaking world beater the second we see him show up. So Drew Lock, even though this wasn't a great performance, it was a hell of a lot better than the first 2 we saw him have against the Chiefs. And just the fact he can make some of these big-time throws that other quarterbacks, wouldn't even really dream of attempting, I'm still not, giving up on him just yet. I think we've seen enough upside from him to this point to think that he can maybe improve decision-making and bring it back together. And I'd also like to see him do it with a better offensive line, maybe having his number 1 wide receiver, Courtland Sutton, in the picture. So Fantasyland, no, we're not touching Drew Lock in 2020, but I would not give up on his, long-term career in Denver just yet. I think that's going to about do it here. Melvin Gordon, 15 carries, 131 yards. Philip Lindsay, 14 carries, 26 yards. Ended up being about a 50% situation. That's what we've seen all year. It was just Melvin Gordon with the 65-yard run that gave him the edge in this one. So Gordon, with Lindsay involved, he's going to be more of an upside running back 3 for me. When Lindsay's out of the picture, that's when we can feel more confident about him getting that true workhorse role. But credit to Gordon, he was running well tonight. Unfortunately, couldn't find the end zone for his trouble. PFF matchup stat, Patrick Mahomes got the win in this one. He's lost, since joining the NFL and all that. He has not lost a game by more than 8 points, though, by more than 1 score since November 19th, 2016 at Texas Tech. They lost, barn burner to Iowa State 66-10. So that game was quite a bit more than 1 score, but realize that, the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes under center are never out of a game, and it is absolutely wild to watch. That's going to do it, everybody. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. The PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, bringing you new episodes every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We'll be back here on Tuesday with a recap of the 2 Monday night games. I also want to go over some waiver wire goodness. So thank you, as always, and until next time, take care, everybody. Have a good Week 14. Hope the Week 13 went well. And Fantasy Football Playoffs, if you haven't already made them or are in them, hopefully we are going to be doing that here this week and beyond. So let's go get that title, everybody, and thank you for listening. Take care.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.